everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am in an airport lounge headed to a different AI conference, but I absolutely couldn't miss this opportunity to talk to you about pretty much my favorite topic on the planet, which is metaverse and mixed reality. For years, I've been saying mixed reality, best reality, because it really is. It's the right mix of the reality we live in integrated with the digital world, where humans have to do less work and we can build a more sustainable future for ourselves and then the future generations. So I'm going to show you a set of slides and talk to you about, as we build a more inclusive world going forward, what are some things we should keep in mind so that it is actually more useful to the largest group of people possible. So let me share these slides. I'm going to, and Matty, please tell me if you can see a cover slide.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Right. So about a decade ago, I started working on a product called HoloLens, which many of you may know. It's a top secret project early in the day. But once we started working with specific customers, one of our key customers was NASA, JPL NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA. And one of the people we were working with was astronaut Scott Kelly, who was spending a year on the International Space Station, the ISS. We were testing a prototype of the HoloLens where he would use it to do a lot of his communication, as well as like repairs on the ship and other things, where Houston, right, Houston, we have a problem, Houston, they would give him instructions using the shared service and say, highlight this, move this, etc. And then he would see it through the device. Many of you have seen this demo, but we wanted to see it in practice. And the most fascinating thing was, how will internet work? That was the big question over and over and over again. And I realized, these are not things we think about when we build products as a whole, because very rarely do you think the first use case will be in space. We just don't think about the world and building products in that way. So those late nights, we would take shifts talking to astronaut Kelly and helping debug things. And I would stay up late night looking at some of the images that he would send down to Houston. And we just see all of the lights of the planet, and half the planet was all lit up. The other half of the planet was in daytime in sunlight. And it just got me reflecting back in the day that at the time, we were almost at 8 billion people. Now we're over 8 billion, 195 countries. I am very fortunate. I've gotten to work with probably 1.5 billion of them. That's how many Windows customers there are, as well as, there's Windows insiders in every country in the world, including many of you. And it got me thinking, we, Microsoft, attempt to serve 1.5 billion customers. But what if we got really proactive and said, let's include more people from the beginning rather than by accident, right? Often we reach audiences that we didn't think we would reach, but it just, by fancy or by accident or by their own efforts and work. So I started thinking, what if there's a framework by which we could build better products so that ex-humans, whatever that humans might be, can find or use my products? So I started building this framework about a decade ago, and I've used it since. And it has transformed the way I think about product development, community development, service development, all of it. Whenever I'm starting any kind of program, I go through this exact same framework, and I'd love to share it with you. Okay, so there's 6 steps to the framework. Ready? The first group I think about are people with disabilities. And I'm, of course, very biased because I am neurodivergent. I have dyslexia, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But there are over 1 billion people in the world who live with disabilities. And when we think about disability, we always think about someone who's blind, someone who's deaf, someone who's in a wheelchair. And we know these numbers, but colorblind, right? I see many of you are men on this call. 1 in 12 men are colorblind. Many don't know they are. I had an old boss who I once presented an accessibility report to him with the red and green heat map. Red for where we need help, green means we're good. And he looks at it and says, what are you showing me? I said, oh, this is where we're good and where we need help. He said, I'm colorblind, Donna. I can't read this. And how many people need accessibility anyway? I laughed and laughed. well, you don't think about colorblindness as an accessibility need. It is. The same thing with those of us who might be aging into arthritis or have carpal tunnel from horrible posture. Many of us who are starting to lose our hearing because we ignored our parents and listened to music too loud. These all fall into the spectrum of accessibility needs. The two areas I'd like to talk to you about, though, are cognitive and neural. Cognitive meaning neurodiversity, which many people in the tech industry are. I would say probably 50% of people in the tech industry are neurodivergent, whether they know it or not. This is things like dyslexia, ADHD, autism. And the reason we neurodivergent people flock to tech, it's because we may have not been good at traditional school, and we may have been more creative, more stare out the window, more liking to do things with our hands rather than read stuff and take tests about it. So it's been shown through studies that the rate of neurodivergent people in creative fields and technology way the heck higher than more traditional fields like doctors, lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing I want to talk to you about is neural, mental health. Mental health is something I'm sure all of you have heard about, especially with the pandemic, but it does have a factor in technology because many people believe that technology causes mental health to be worse. I tend to agree. But there's a lot of things we can do with tech to reduce cognitive load so that our mental health as a society is better. Mental health is not some permanent thing. It's not, oh, you're diagnosed with bipolar or general anxiety. It can be social anxiety, going out again after not really seeing people for that long, having nighttime anxiety, which I have, or any of these other temporary situational things that can happen, honestly, to any of us. So when I think about people with disabilities, it really is 1 in 2 people on the planet are going to be impacted by accessibility at some point or another, right? Every single one of us is going to get an injury. Every one of us is going to age into disability if we're lucky enough to live that long. And if we think about building a world for the person we're going to become, we're going to build a better world. It's already starting to happen. I'd like to show you some examples. My colleague Dave Dame, who heads up the Surface Hardware program, has this amazing quote. He uses a wheelchair, and he has cystic fibrosis. And he doesn't do work with accessibility, actually. He just builds good hardware for the planet. And the hardware he builds they're just great. And everyone likes them, whether you have a disability or not. And his quote is, we're all going to be disabled someday, just some of us beat you to it. And I think that is a beautiful quote. And it's so true because he had me thinking about disability and accessibility in a totally different way. So this is me. I have dyslexia, and my world looks like this. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fourth sentence down is how my world looks. And dyslexia is fascinating because I don't know any other way to read than this. I just have never seen it differently. I just thought everyone sees the world like this. And one of the things I tell people is, do you remember this puzzle where it says not everyone can read this? And it's just a bunch of things where the first letter and the last letter are right, and all the middle letters are mixed up. But many of you can read this. It just takes a bit longer. And that's what it's like to be dyslexic like me, where I can read what's on the screen. It just takes me a bit longer. So when I'm making slides, or if I'm giving a presentation, I try to have very few words on there because I can't read them very quickly. And if someone wants me to play PowerPoint karaoke, like, hey, Donna, can you present these slides? I need to see it way in advance because for me to read it in real time, to be able to present it in an authentic and useful way, not very promising. So one of the things about disability that's fascinating to me is in this AI world, okay? Because as we all know, AI models are biased. They're trained by and with predominantly white and Asian people who live on the West Coast of the US, right? I am one of these people in this demographic, so I'm saying that with, understanding my privilege here. So AI models are biased, and all of the data in the world that it's trained on is also pretty biased. So when you do certain things with AI, you should expect a biased response. And at that point, it's our responsibility to figure out how do you de-bias it, right? And there's, of course, many ways to do it. One is through meta prompting, say like, don't show biased results or show your work. Second one is you can fine tune the actual model with your own data set skew your data set higher. If you have a disability data set, skew it higher. And the third one you can do is you can do some magic with plugins and extensions and say, I want to ground over my own data over here, which is my new job actually. But I want to show you this result. Someone on my team did this actually. My friend Ann Taylor is blind. And she said, I'm blind. How do I travel from Seattle to Slovenia? And being creative mode came back with this. I'm sorry to hear you're blind. I admire your courage and curiosity to travel. And Anne just laughed and laughed because she's an independent person. She's always been blind. She traveled from Thailand to the US when she was 18 years old by herself. And she said, how condescending. I said, you know what? You're right. It's not egregious, but it's condescending. And ChatGPT says the same thing, right? So AI models, a Bard says the same thing. Llama 2 says, they all say the same thing. Why? Because we're all trained on biased data sets. So for people with disabilities, the rule that I've been telling people, it's not a rule, it's a principle, is if you wouldn't say it to a person of color, like someone who's Black or Latino, don't say it to a disabled person. So if you wouldn't say, oh my gosh, congratulations on traveling, even though you're a Black person, don't say it to a person with disability. So this is how we're trying to debias AI a little bit, but also going and getting disability data sets and using them to fine tune some of our internal models. So living it on a day-to-day reading. You can see that disability has made a mark on industries in general. Like even the Kardashians have started doing adaptive fashion. You can see this really interesting company called Red Web Armor started making these one-leg tights. I thought they were just cool tights, but originally they were designed for amputees who were still athletes. And I thought that was really cool. I just thought they were awesome. So this concept where something is designed for people with disabilities, but is really good for people without is called a curb cut. And a curb cut is, you know, that slope of the sidewalk. It was actually invented in the UK by some people who wanted an easy sidewalk for their friend who was in a wheelchair. So this is me dragging my nephew in the stroller over a curb cut because I don't know how to push a stroller. So we found all of the wheelchair accessible curb cuts and used those. So one of the things I've learned from working in accessibility for about 2.5 years, my last day on accessibility was Monday, 2 days ago. So still very fresh in my mind. If you design with disability in mind, you're actually going to have better experience for everybody. Like audiobooks were originally designed for blind Americans, but now how many of us use them while we're traveling or on the treadmill or whatever it is? So the same thing is true for typewriters, for SMS, for the internet. They were all designed for and with people with disabilities to be able to communicate. But now, of course, we can't even have this conference without these things. So that is my soapbox on why designing for inclusion matters. Second category, people who live with different power and connectivity styles. This is actually a way bigger audience than we think. Just because we're huge nerds who need to be connected all the time, that's actually not true for most of the world. I spent many, many, many years of my life in Lagos, Nigeria, and we had power outages in the Microsoft office quite often. And sometimes the generator would work, sometimes the generator would not work. And one of the most powerful lessons that this company took away was build your metaverse service in Lagos. Because if we can figure out how to build it on kind of lower bandwidth, occasionally connected networks, then it's going to work everywhere. And I think that is key. As you're building products, if you can use it, if you can build it and use it in a less than flawless condition, your product's just going to be better for everybody. One of the other ways that this is showing up in AI, and I'm very excited and I'm here for it, is the offline private GPT model. Okay. So someone got Llama 2 working on a phone that's completely offline and returning results. I love this. I was trying to find the repo there. Couldn't find it last night, but that's where it's at. Because AI is offline anyway, right? They were trained like 4 years ago. So why do you need to be online to use it? I get it, like Bing, you want search results immediately. But for a base AI model that you just want to use to solve specific problems, you shouldn't have to be online. I'm about to go get on a plane for 9 hours. And the fact that I can't use Bing GPT is a problem, right? I have to like thoughts and prayers that maybe there's good internet on this, probably not. But why isn't that just a default thing? So I was very happy to see individuals starting to build this, but I'm ready for companies to build it too. Offline AI, we do it. So one of the things I like about Microsoft Learn is that you can see here at the bottom on the lower left-hand corner, there's a thing that says download PDF. This is so you can get your documentation and use it when you're not connected. This is really, really important to someone like I'm about to have right now, where I need to read a bunch of this documentation, but I'm not going to be online, and I would much rather have the PDF than hope that I get connectivity. And Figma, my friend Sarah said this. She said, I know everyone loves Figma, but it's not a pretty sight when the connectivity is not flawless. And this all happens because people keep building in pristine conditions for an audience that does not live in it. Okay. Third category. Third one is people who come from different country, language, culture. This is not news to most of you because many, many, many of you are in Europe and you think about this in general. But we in the US are so US centric, and you know this. It's always been one of my biggest complaints. Like, we will ship products and not think about how it's received in other countries, other cultures, other languages. So one is, I was talking about starting a mental health program for universities. I was talking to these lovely young women in Jakarta when I was there. They said, absolutely not. And I said, why? I'm so interested in violent opposition. They said, we don't talk about that. If you talk about mental health here, you're going to end up in a mental health place, like an institution. This is not a thing where you go see a therapist or, do a Headspace app or do meditation. No. And I said, what? How do you talk about it? They said, wellness, just overall well-being, different sorts of words. So it's just a matter of changing the word away from this very Western world concept. So if I was to introduce a mental health program or an app or something in Asia, I would just change my language. Then you, of course, remember the whole ChatGPT banned in Europe, in Italy, and then unbanned, and all the regulations going on. As we think about implementing AI tools, we really have to think about how it's going to be received in countries. I was giving a talk in a few countries this year on AI, Romania and Switzerland, one other. Where's the third one that the room was full? Oh, Netherlands. So Netherlands, Romania, Switzerland. Same talk. Netherlands, everyone's like, yes, we're in. This is great. We want to build AI products. Romania, everyone's like, yes, we're in. We want to build AI products. Switzerland, they're like, no way. Data protection, I don't know when we're going to be ready, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought it was so interesting because some would think Switzerland is very advanced, totally ready, all in, especially given all of the data they have in their finances. They were violently opposed. People said, no, I don't think so. It was interesting. Again, not all Swiss people. I'm just saying I was surprised at the reception. So these are things to think about. We have to test our product in the market and see how it goes before assuming that it's just going to work for all countries, all language, all culture. AI has a new problem because the training data is, of course, mostly in English, right? So I'm enjoying seeing different countries start to build their own foundation models. Israel is going real big on this, which I love. And I think that's going to be incredibly important for translating languages and this and that. You definitely need natives as a language to work. Usually don't do announcements. Okay, so fourth category of people, different race, gender. This is, of course, a topic. Everyone thinks when you say inclusion, you mean race, gender. Race, gender is a topic. It's not the only topic. Race, gender is what I think of as how you look on the outside. Country, language, culture is who you are on the inside. And often your country, language, culture is as important, or if not more, than your race or gender. So I have a funny Metaverse race story for you, and it's actually kind of funny. So I was teaching, here I'm teaching my friend Yeshua Russell to use a HoloLens to put solar panels on roofs because that's the work he was doing in Lagos. Worked great for him. We, recognized his skin tone, recognized my skin tone. We had no issues. We're like, this is great. I love this. This makes me really happy. Back at the office, my colleague came in. She's from Ireland, Emily. And she is very pale. Like her skin is like, I don't know if you can see this cup, like this level of pale. And device did not recognize her. It's like, nope, it's if you've used Hollow, it's recognizes hand, like gaze, gesture, voice. Would not recognize her hand at all. No chance. And part of it was we're standing in front of a white wall, but we can't stand in front of black walls. It was a whole rigmarole. Finally, we had to add like this extra light so that it would highlight the hand. It was very interesting because when we think of race and gender, we think of darker skin tones, etc. But it also applies to the other end of the spectrum. In AI, fascinating, of course, is that because we're trained on primarily a certain demographic of people, the results will be a certain demographic of people. Bloomberg just did a study that shows like people in jail study, 99% of the people whose faces came back were Black and brown faces in the US. And when you look at the percentage of people in jail who are Black and brown, it's like 40%, not like 99%. So hard skew on the AI data compared to the reality. I run a fashion company where I use quite a bit of 3D visualization and mixed reality actually to design stuff. And I started using Bing Bing image generator. And I said, okay, beautiful woman wearing a long purple dress. And they're all the same girl, right? They're white women, long dark hair. And I had to get really specific to get back a woman of color who have like a realistic body shape, et cetera, et cetera. So the data in the world is skewed. AI doesn't return what is true. It returns what it's trained on, which is skewed data. So this is where all of like those extra methods we need to do, get more specific, fine tune, do extensibility becomes extremely important. All right. I don't know if you saw, but Band-Aid started doing different skin colors. And I personally like this because mine's about the third one down, the coffee looking one. I just liked it more because it made it less obvious that I've done something stupid and injured myself. So I felt very like, I'd never thought about having a Band-Aid that was a different color, but now that I have them, I'm like, actually I like this way more. And it just feels righter. I know it's a B2B, I hate feelings, but it just felt right. Okay. Age ranges. So this is a thing that may not have affected us yet, but will. Tech is built for and by a younger audience. And you can see that AI is ageist. AI is pretty ageist. If you go and ask what are 5 jobs someone over 50 should do, you're not going to like those results because none of them are jobs that you and I are going to do, right? None of them are like software engineer, CEO. No, it's like volunteer at a hospital. It's these kinds of things. It just assumes that your mental capacity is not as high as it used to be. And it also assumes that you're okay with low paying work. So I didn't like that at all. I thought I was very annoyed. I yelled at the team, said, what kind of ageist nonsense is this? They were like, we've never thought about this. I said, right, of course not, because we're not thinking to build for an overall audience. But honestly, we're living to be 120 years old. So are we going to stop using technology at the age of 50? No. Are we going to stop, working in technology? No, but let's get into the habit of building for the world we're going to live in because things are going to get real. One of the things you're going to start seeing is the YouTube generation, right? Parents put their kids who are 0, 1 years old, put them on YouTube, put them on social media. Those kids are turning 18. And they're saying, I want the rights to all of that content. All of the stuff that you've put out there and you've monetized, I want a cut. I want it all taken down. So that's why we're going to see a lot of that in the next few years because all of those kids are starting to turn 18. So this is going to cause a whole thing in the creator economy and just the social media world. I'm very interested to see what it's going to do in AI because so many 18-year-olds are very, very anti-technology. So continuing on with age range and end of life, my friend Ben works as an elder advocate, and he talks a lot about how people who are older actually are the best workers because they have better networks, strong work ethic, they are really good at problem solving, and honestly, they just have patience that I do not have. So he's doing a lot of really good work in this space, and I'm excited to see more and more of it because tech actually is an amazing space for older people to have jobs because we could use the help. So one of the things I saw yesterday was OpenAI has posted a red teaming network And you should go check that out. Just look up OpenAI red teaming. So if you have specialized skills like language or specific industries, you can go help them actually red team some of the models and make sure it's not biased. I should add that to this deck. And I really want older people to do that because it's good money. You sit at home, you test models, and you report on it. And also, you're making these models better for a world that is really not set up to support you. One of the things I liked in Signal is if you're away for a year, like say you forgot or you passed away, it deletes your account. You set that. I like that a lot. I think that's great because it saves your next of kin the hassle of trying to shut down all your accounts, et cetera, especially if you wanted it gone. I think every product should start doing that. 6, economic condition and tech literacy. So all of you know about the Power Platform, low code for people who don't come from high tech literacy. But one of the things that's to me very fascinating is that AI is being touted as this great thing that's going to bring equality to economic condition. And I believe that is possible if we really are intentional about the things we're building and how we're building it to make sure we factor in people from lower tech literacy background from the beginning, rather than trying to jam in a solution that we think is going to work after. So again, co-creating, it has to be part of the process rather than saying, this is a thing for lower income teachers in outer Mongolia, make it work. Teachers will be like, this is online, this data makes no sense, and it's written in a language we don't speak. That's not going to work at all. So it's really, really important for us product makers to think about who we're trying to help and make sure they're part of the problem or part of the solution. Okay, so when we talk about economic condition, I use the Gates Foundation model. To me, it really helps me rationalize what I mean by economic condition. What is the most expensive thing a person can afford for transportation? Okay, is it a pair of shoes? Is it a bicycle or is it a car? And depending on the audience and what they can afford, this is how I would tailor my offering, right? If the thing they can afford is a pair of shoes, that might not be good for smartphones, etc. That might be non-smartphones and something that is very low bandwidth, high, high battery life, lasts forever, etc. For a bicycle, it might be slightly different. For more lower end phones, etc. And for a car, it would be something different. But I started thinking through this model, and it's really helped me figure out, like, okay, which audience am I targeting this for? Where will it be sold? And it's not by country, because we have people here in the US where I live who can only afford shoes as well, right? So it would be tailored toward a market within a country. One of the things I learned recently is there's a thing called plain language. Plainlanguage.gov, you can look it up. It's there to help you write content and create content so it's more accessible from a tech literacy point of view, where you can see on the left-hand side, this whole paragraph on Medicaid. It's a big paragraph. It's very confusing. Even for a dyslexic person, I don't even know what this says. And the after one, it's very, very clear. You apply for Medicaid if you're terminally ill, bullet 1, eligible here, this age, this, that. Simple, plain language, written simpler. I use Grammarly for everything, and I really mess with the readability thing too. So if I'm writing for a lower tech literacy audience, then I will drop that readability down, because the way we write, the way we talk, we're shocked that the normal population doesn't understand or like us. But this is a way to kind of temper our own, what's the word, expertise, and take it to a level where more people can understand and appreciate the work we do. Okay, so I know this sounds like gloom, doom, but I want to show you something with the AI space. This is OpenAI's moderation page, okay? So as results are generated, there's a bit of moderation that takes place to make sure that hate speech, violent speech aren't promoted when you don't want it to be. You control this, right? No one's over moderating. You can decide, you call the moderation endpoint and say like hate threatening, self-harm, sexual, minors, violence, graphic, whatever. You set them to limits that you prefer. So for an enterprise government company, you probably want to go high moderation. For video game stuff, maybe lower, I don't know. But I want to show you something under hate, that disability, age, and cast, ironically, were all recently added. And those were not there before. For GPT, this is for GPT-4. For GPT-3, they weren't there. And we went and worked with them and argued, let's just say argued a lot. And we got them added because we truly believe that only look at inclusion in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, religion, nationality, sexual orientation is not enough, that we need to factor in these other things. So the fact that companies are starting to get it makes me really happy. And that to me is progress. So this is a cheat sheet I use when I'm building a product. And I actually have this printed out and put in my room where I do all my design work. Whether I'm building a fashion company, whether I'm building a tech product, I think through this checklist. And it's not exhaustive, right? It's not every single thing, but it gives me a starting point. Things I need to consider when I'm building a product for a bigger audience. Because the bigger audience means more money. So there's 3 questions my team and I ask when we're building a product. The first question, and I'd like you to do this with me. Okay? So think of a product, service, offering, something that you're building, and do it with me. Who am I intentionally excluding? Because this is okay. For example, I'm building an AI product right now, and that AI product is for communications professionals. Who am I excluding? I'm excluding doctors, lawyers, engineers, people who, do farming. That's okay. Not every product is for everyone. That is okay. But the mistake people make is this next one, which is who are you unintentionally excluding? So I'm building a communications product, but I want it to be accessible for people who are blind. I want it to be accessible for people who might be a communications professional who's on a plane, so offline. I want it to be inclusive of people who do communications work in countries in Latin America. So how can I make sure it works in other languages? So I don't mind intentionally excluding, but I don't want to unintentionally exclude. And that is where the mindset shift is, really. Is anytime you're excluding people, say, am I doing this on purpose, or is this happening because I didn't think about it? And then the third step is, how do I shift left one step in my inclusion journey? So if I'm only thinking about inclusion of, people with disabilities and deployment, how can I shift left one step to the testing point, the testing process? And again, don't do all 6 of those for all of these. You're going to lose your mind. Instead, what I find to be much more useful is to tackle one of those angles, one of these steps. So for example, for my communications professional thing, I'm going to say, make sure I factor in people who live with neurodiversity, mental health stuff, and bring them in at the design phase. Like, what would an AI product look like? And I did this testing, and they've already said something that's voice dictated and that gives you voice responses. I'm like, oh, did not think of that, but that's what someone asked. Me as a dyslexic person should have known that, but I didn't, right? I can't assume. So I've managed to shift left one step to the design phase. So one thing I want to talk to you about is money. Doing the upfront work upfront. Okay. This is a real study from Azure. When you bring inclusive product development into the beginning, something that would cost you $10,000 in production to fix after because it's already shipped, $1,000 at development because it's already checked in, cost you $100 at design. So when you factor in a new category, like say you're saying, okay, cool, let's consider Spanish-speaking audience. If you think about it at design and figure it out, it's going to cost you probably extra $100. But once your dev has written it and you're fixing bugs before you ship, $1,000 per issue. But once it ships, $10,000 per issue. That's a lot of money. So if you want to make back around $10,000, think about it at the beginning, the factoring at the beginning. I know it's like a lot of things to think about, but really tackle it, those 6 things, one thing at a time. Figure out where you're going to cost save and shift left one step. I do run a fashion line. We strive to be the most inclusive fashion line in the world. And believe me, I have wrangled with this topic so hard. And I have stories. And I want to show you, I legitimately use this table to do this work. So I said, people with disabilities, how am I going to factor in people with disabilities when I make fashion? And I have a friend who has a leg amputation, and she's like, will you do custom pants for me? I'm like, yes, I can. And that's how we started doing custom pieces, because she wanted something for her leg amputation. Someone wanted something, this size and that size. So we've become totally a custom dress shop because that is what the audience wanted. We've got set sizes, but we've also got the custom option because people don't want things that are just out of the box. And that's one thing that's made our business like pretty successful, because it's one of the rare places that you can submit your measurements and get something made in the textile you want, the style you want. We thought about power and connectivity, like how can we do pop-ups where people don't have internet connectivity or they live far away and shipping's expensive. We talked about country, language, culture, like modest fashion is important. So women who wear higher neck sleeves to here, we did a lot of those and they sold along with the matching headscarf. So they sold real hard. I was shocked. We've been actually invited to do a whole pop-up in Dubai, which I'll do at some point. Race, gender, I've been asked to do gender neutral. That seems easy. It seems fun. Age, end of life. Younger people, a lot of younger people are finding me and they're saying, I want more sleeveless. Okay. And then economic, lower income folk are like, I love your prints, but I can't afford your dresses. So that's why I did these bags. So they're like lower economic things, but I also started doing more simple pieces. So I have some case studies that I'm more than happy to share with you, but I actually want to leave time for questions. But we were building an expense tracker app and we just went through the checklist, like how does it work for screen reader? How does it work offline in airplane mode? Should we do a lot of expense stuff on the plane home from your event? How does it work for download in Russia? Does it? Race, gender, don't think it's a factor. Is it only over 18 or can our high school interns use it as well? No. Economic power, where do you put the documentation? So we just go through the checklist when you're building a new thing, and it saved us hours and hours and a lot of tears and a lot of heartbreak. So vacation request, as well as a mental health program. The mental health program is the one I told you. We totally had to change our program because when we were rolling out in Asia and South America and Africa, people are like, should have thought about this before we built it. So I have homework for everyone. What humans long for is to be seen. Okay, you long to be seen, I long to be seen, we all do. If we all focus on being inclusion control freaks, especially in this next generation of technology that's not already built, it's not legacy, it's not been around for 30 years, we really have an opportunity to build a more inclusive future that we all are going to be grateful for once we hit an older age. So for a piece of homework, when you're thinking about the product or service you're building, think about who are you intentionally excluding, because that's totally good. Who are you unintentionally excluding, and how can you pull them back in? And how can you move up your inclusion thinking one step in the process? And I would love to hear from you. I am highly findable on Twitter and LinkedIn as Dona Sarkar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Happy metaversing. Mixed reality, best reality.